Alright, let's talk about ISO 27001. It's a big deal for information security, like having a really good lock on your front door, except it's for all your important data. Now, two things are really important right off the bat: scope and the statement of applicability, or SOA. They're the foundation of your whole security system. Imagine trying to build a house without a blueprint or deciding where the property lines are. Chaos, right? Scope tells you exactly what parts of your organization are covered by ISO 27001. The SOA then lists all the security controls you're using to protect that information. Get these two things right, and you're off to a good start. Mess them up, and you're basically throwing darts blindfolded. Think of it like this. You wouldn't hire a bodyguard to protect your house if they didn't know where your property lines were, right? That's essentially what happens if you don't define your scope properly. And the SOA is like the bodyguard's checklist, making sure they're doing everything necessary to keep you safe. So if you're serious about information security, and let's be honest, in this day and age, who isn't, you need to understand scope and the SOA. We'll break it down in a way that even your grandma who still thinks the internet is a fad can understand. Stay with me, folks. Let's start with the scope, the unsung hero of information security. It's the what of ISO 27001. Defining exactly what information assets and processes your ISMs will cover. It's all about boundaries, people. Think of it like this. Your organization is a big plate of spaghetti, all tangled up and messy. The scope is like drawing a circle around a portion of that spaghetti, defining what you'll be eating right now. That circle is your area of focus, and everything outside of it, well, you're not dealing with that right now. Defining the scope might seem daunting, but it's really about being specific. What information is absolutely critical to your business? What processes handle that information? Who has access to it? Once you know the answers to these questions, you can start drawing your scope around those areas. Don't be afraid to be specific here. The more specific your scope, the more effective your ISMs will be. It's like laser surgery for your information security, targeting exactly what needs protection. Okay, so we know what the scope is, but how does it actually work in the real world? Well, it all depends on your organization. A small mom-and-pop shop will have a much different scope than a multinational corporation. Let's say you're a small bakery. Your most important information might be your secret recipes, customer data, and financial records. Your scope would then focus on protecting the computers and files where this information is stored, as well as the processes for handling it, like online orders and inventory management. Now imagine you're a giant tech company. Your scope might include everything from customer data and intellectual property to financial systems and employee records. You're dealing with a lot more information, more systems, and more complexity. The key takeaway here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to defining the scope. It's all about identifying what's important to your organization and drawing your security perimeter accordingly. Section 4. Navigating the scope. Key considerations for a comprehensive approach. Defining your scope isn't just about drawing lines on a map, it requires some serious thought. You need to consider several factors to ensure your scope is comprehensive and actually protects what matters. First, think about your internal and external context. What are the specific risks and threats your organization faces? What are your legal and regulatory obligations? What are your stakeholders' expectations? These factors will influence what needs to be included in your scope. Next, consider your dependencies. Does your organization rely on any third-party vendors or service providers? If so, you need to think about how their security posture could impact your information security. Remember, your scope isn't set in stone. As your organization evolves, so should your scope. Regularly review and update it to ensure it remains relevant and effective in the face of changing threats and business needs. Section 5. Unraveling the SOA, your risk management roadmap. Now that you've got your scope all figured out, let's talk about its trusty sidekick, the Statement of Applicability, or SOA. This document is essentially your risk management game plan. The SOA lists all the security controls outlined in Annex A of ISO 27001 and indicates whether each control is applicable, not applicable, or partially applicable to your organization. It's like a checklist, but instead of groceries, it's full of security measures. But it's more than just a list. The SOA also explains why each control is or isn't applicable. This is where you get to justify your decisions, showing that you've carefully considered each control and made informed choices based on your specific risks and context. The SOA is a living document, just like your scope. As you identify new risks, implement new controls, or your business needs to change, you'll need to update your SOA to reflect those changes. Section 6. Documenting risks and controls. Building a transparent and accountable system. Here's where the rubber meets the road. The SOA isn't just about checking boxes. It's about documenting your risks and the controls you're using to manage them. This documentation is crucial for demonstrating transparency and accountability. For each control listed in your SOA, you need to provide a brief description of the risk it addresses and how the control mitigates that risk. This information helps everyone involved understand the why behind your security measures. For example, let's say one of your identified risks is unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. A control you might implement is strong password policies. In your SOA, you would document this control, the risk it addresses, and how you're enforcing strong passwords, such as requiring complex passwords and regular password changes. This level of documentation not only helps you stay organized and on top of your security posture, but it also provides evidence that you're taking information security seriously. And trust me, when it comes to audits and certifications, evidence is your best friend. Section 7. Justifying control choices, demonstrating due diligence and informed decision-making. Now, here's the thing. Not every control in Annex A will be relevant to your organization. And that's perfectly fine. The key is to be able to justify why you've chosen to include or exclude specific controls. This justification demonstrates that you haven't just blindly implemented controls for the sake of checking boxes. It shows that you've carefully considered each control, assessed its relevance to your specific risks and context, and made informed decisions based on that assessment. For example, let's say you've decided to exclude a particular control related to physical security because your organization operates entirely online. In your SOA, you would document this exclusion and explain that the control is not applicable because you don't have any physical assets that require protection. This level of justification is essential for demonstrating due diligence and building confidence in your ISMs. It shows that you're not just going through the motions, but that you're making thoughtful decisions about your security posture.